All right, welcome everybody to the Hunger in America Summit. Thank you for joining us. My name is Adam Bianco with Move for Hunger, and all of us on the screen today are happy to have you join us for a conversation that frankly needs to happen. Each one of our speakers represents a different area of hunger in America. Our hope by bringing them all together over the next hour is that we can go beyond our bubbles and collaborate. We'll discuss hunger and the stigmas around it, how COVID has impacted an already real and overwhelming issue, and how we can build towards a nation where everyone has enough to eat, because the old normal wasn't good enough. We ask that if you do post on social media during or after the event, please use the hashtag Hunger Summit and follow Move for Hunger to learn more about our organization and how to follow our panelists. To help facilitate these conversations today, it is my pleasure to introduce our moderator, Christy Duncan Anderson, the Executive Director of the Albertsons Companies Foundation, which consistently strives to improve the quality of life for the communities served. Christy, thank you for being here. The floor, or in this case, the screen, is all yours. Take it away.
Thank you, Adam. I am so honored to be here and so grateful to be part of this conversation. I don't know about all of you, but I am really looking forward to hearing what our really esteemed panelists have to say. I'm going to go ahead and let them each introduce themselves because they can do it better than anybody else. And I'm going to go ahead and go in alphabetical order by first name, so all of you panelists know when you're coming up. So we'll start with Adam Lowy, please.
Hi, everybody. My name is Adam Lowy. I'm the founder and executive director of Move for Hunger. I started the organization in 2009 after seeing food go to waste in my family's 100-year-old moving company. And we learned very quickly how critical transportation was to being able to recover food, not just from people moving, but from big companies, from gleanings, from food drives, but also to be able to get food to where it needs to be. Over the past 12 years, Move for Hunger has helped feed more than 20 million people. And we're working hard to ensure that transportation continue to be that connector to be able to get food into the hands of people that need it most.
Thanks, Adam, and thank you for all you do. It's really appreciated. Next is Clancy Harrison.
Hello, everyone. Again, it's such an honor to be here. My name is Clancy Harrison. I'm the founder of the Food Dignity Project, which really, it's not a project anymore. We're graduating to a movement. So I'm really excited to share that, because what we do is we erase the stigma associated with food assistance programs so we can change the culture. And we really do that through systematic and policy change with corporations, nonprofits, universities, and healthcare organizations. Outside of that, I'm a registered dietitian, TEDx speaker. I'm also the president of a large food pantry in northeastern Pennsylvania, where we saw a huge increase from 150 people per distribution to upwards of 2,000 people. So clearly the needs here. It's an honor to be on this stage, on this panel, to discuss how we can be the solution.
That is a huge increase. And I love the differentiation between a project and a movement. I think that's really important. All right, thank you. Next is Rebecca Middleton, please.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you so much for having me. Thanks to Adam and Move for Hunger for inviting me to be a part of this group. So as Christy said, I'm Rebecca Middleton. I'm the Chief Advocacy and Engagement Officer at the World Food Program USA. We're a US-based 501c3 that supports the UN World Food Program through advocacy, fundraising, and communications. I've been in DC in the policy and advocacy space for over 20 years, started on Capitol Hill. I'm a recovering lobbyist, and I've spent the last 10 years almost in the anti-hunger advocacy space. I've been at WFP USA for about a year, and prior to that was with the Alliance to End Hunger, which is where I got to know Move for Hunger. So really glad to be here and look forward to the conversation.
And we're very lucky to have you here too. Thank you for joining us. Last but certainly not least is Reggie Young.
Hello, everyone. My name is Reggie Young. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer at the Houston Food Bank. The Houston Food Bank covers 18 counties in Southeast Texas. And part of my job is really to work with our pantries within the community. We have over 600 pantries that we work with to allocate food resources throughout those 18 counties. And also I work on addressing root causes of food insecurity through an initiative that we have called Food for Change, which I hope to talk about a little bit later. But happy to be here and with all the rest of the guests, and look forward to the discussion.
Me too. Thanks for joining us. I'm looking forward to hearing about that. I'd like to start with just kind of talking about okay, so 2020 was a big year. 2020, a lot happened, but if we could just rewind, and I know it's hard to remember pre-2020, but let's just try. And let's talk about, let's just level set about the state of food insecurity before then, because food insecurity isn't new. I feel like it got a big light shed on it during the pandemic, but wasn't great beforehand. So Adam, I don't know if you have any thoughts about that.
Yeah, I don't feel that everybody necessarily adequately understands how big the need was beforehand, right? 37 million Americans were struggling with food insecurity before COVID-19 started. That need has obviously increased dramatically, which we'll hear today. And the reasons why people find themselves food insecure, I think really vary across community. But I think the one thing that is true and remains constant is that hunger is a symptom of poverty. And people are finding themselves lacking food because of the fact that they can't get out of this cycle of poverty. And while there are a lot of solutions in place, whether it be food banks, pantries, government programs, they're not working to bring people out and get people to a place where they can not only afford to feed themselves, but where they can afford to just live a normal life like so many of us. So I think it's really important to start there. And the fact that, we're coming from a place where organizations like those that are on this panel today have been doing work for a very long time to address this. COVID-19 made it significantly harder because so many more people have now fallen into that category of food insecure. And we're really going to need to work harder together to be able to address these challenges.
Yeah, I hear you. And I think it's a really good point about how, we are in the hunger space addressing a symptom, but not necessarily the core problem. But that said, addressing the symptom is important as well. Clancy, in your work before pre-pandemic, can you talk a little bit about what you were seeing?
Yeah,
Sounds like
sure.
you had a huge jump.
Well, no, but I'm going to do it from the lens of a speaker. So for me, just a backstory on myself, I'm a recovering food elitist. I made so many assumptions as a healthcare professional. I just assumed my patients could get into a car, go to a grocery store, the grocery store would have food, and then they could buy the food. So it wasn't until I started working at the food pantry, I really realized, I was part of the problem. I wasn't the solution. And so as a speaker pre-COVID, when I knew I had to get the message out, I couldn't sell myself because all the event planners thought, hunger is not inclusive. People are going to close their ears. That's more of a breakout. We're not going to hire you. And I had to really push and sell myself. I was a salmon swimming upstream. And now if you look at where we are with COVID, hunger is a trendy topic for speakers. I'm speaking 2 to 3 times a week and I'm not even pitching myself. So that is just to show you how important that hunger is on the forefront of people's minds where it wasn't before. So I think that, obviously our food pantry increased, but I think from talking from a speaker perspective, that was a really big change for me to go through.
Yeah, I'll bet. And a huge change too. I imagine that it's somehow validating in a way, but also a little bit upsetting that only now we can pay attention to this. I imagine. Reggie, you're no stranger in Houston to disasters. And so I feel, how is it that you've really been able to use some of those skills that you have in dealing with disasters, hurricanes, et cetera, and how has that helped, and what has surprised you in the pandemic as a disaster different than what you've seen before?
Right. Yeah. So yeah, we definitely are not a stranger to disasters. Obviously, one of the bigger ones that occurred prior to COVID-19 was when we dealt with Harvey. Right. So I think the lessons that we learned is always just to be adaptable. And we have a network, our partners who distribute to the clients directly, they've been adaptable with us. And so I think it shouldn't be a surprise to me, but during COVID-19, I was telling people on my team, I was telling some of our partners like, hey, this is going to be a marathon, but we don't know if we're on mile 2, mile 12, or mile 20. And so we have to pace ourselves in this scenario. But I was a little bit surprised of how well the network responded to being adaptable with a variety of different types of circumstances that are completely different than if you're dealing with a hurricane. Everything from social distancing to not being able to provide client choice and really shifting to more of a quick distribution model, which in a lot of ways is also, it takes away a lot of the personability of interacting with an individual on a regular basis. And so there were a lot of things that were sacrificed in the way that we had to adapt to really trying to meet the need during this time frame. But our network has been very creative in trying to ensure that they are still providing the resources that families are needing, adapting to increases of needs up to 3 times the number of people that they were seeing on any given time. So a big distribution prior to COVID-19 would have probably been somewhere in around 300 to 500 people, whereas some of our standard distributions now are 1,200 people, and our largest distributions tend to have 5,000 to 7,000 people, right? And so, but the network has adapted to that. They've been, really resilient and really responsive to the needs of families, and still even trying to be innovative within the constraints that COVID-19 has presented, and trying to do things like client choice and trying to provide additional resources to people, knowing that they're only going to have a short amount of time with those individuals.
Yeah, flexibility and adaptation is such key things right now. And I agree with you on the mileage. I personally, I feel like I'm on mile 100. The problem is, I don't know if there is an end. I don't know if there is a finish line. And if there is, I don't know how far ahead of it is for us. So I think part of the adaptability is getting used to some of the running at the higher speed. And Rebecca, you've worked a lot with internationally, and I feel that there's a lot of conception that maybe hunger is, the distended bellies in third world countries. And while I've heard a lot, oh yeah, hunger is a problem. Yeah, I can see that hunger is a problem in the US, but it's not here. It's always somewhere else. Can you talk a little bit about what you're seeing?
Sure, and I'll say it's here and there. I mean, it's one of the things that I've really benefited from being with the Alliance to End Hunger for 8 years, was that they look at both domestic and international hunger. And then the domestic side, I mean, in every single congressional district, which is how I filter things being a DC person, but in every single congressional district, there are a large number of folks who don't know how they're going to feed their family enough nutritious food for the month. And I think that's one of the things that sort of surprises folks, is it's not just, oh, that thing over there, it's here in all of our communities. And similarly, globally, it looks different in different places. Certainly there is the borderline famine context that unfortunately we still see. There are 4 countries right now that are on the brink of famine, if not, actually there are areas in Yemen in particular that are already tripping into that zone of where, I mean, people are dying because of access to enough calories, not even nutritious food. And so it's more extreme, but I think it's important, particularly being in the US, to talk about both. It's an and that we can work toward, not an or. So it's, I think the thing that surprised me was, when that switch flipped last March, how quickly folks adapted. I think a couple of folks have talked about that already. I mean, really just, okay, old playbook out the window, let's start a new one. That happened on the international front too. And I think we'll talk about that in a little bit, but also bringing the issue to the forefront. I mean, it's always there, it's persistent, it's pervasive domestically and internationally. And so, having the attention on the issue, I'm a child of the 80s, so I remember, We Are the World and Farm Aid and Live Aid, and haven't seen attention like that until now. Unfortunately, you'd hope we'd be past it in the 21st century, but here we are. But glad to be having this conversation to hopefully keep the conversation going beyond the crisis.
Yeah, but here we are. I agree. Okay, so I want to do a really quick lightning round in just, a sentence or two. Can each of you tell me about some innovation you saw during the pandemic that you thought was great, that surprised you, that you want to make sure everybody knows about? I'll start with Adam again.
So one thing that we actually tried out, and it didn't happen because we were planning it, it happened because the need was there. You couldn't hold food drives in the way that we were doing before, right? Social distancing made it very difficult for people to gather and help. But I think the desire to volunteer and support families in need was probably at its peak. So we created a socially distant food drive. And when I say we, I mean 2 young girls that had a desire to help people. And the Front Porch Food Drive was born, where we provided food collection bags They could leave them on people's front porches, and then we sent a truck to go pick them up in those communities and delivered them to local food banks. No gathering required. And we found that every single one of those food drives has yielded, several thousand pounds of food, because again, it's not like time stopped. It's not like the need to help out one another ended in that moment. The desire was there. And I think we just needed to continue to find ways to make it easy for people to take action. So that was something we were very excited about. And we're going to plan to continue as well.
I love that. Great for humanity, right? You know what? I forgot to mention before we started, I realize I'm in a place of privilege to get to ask questions of this great panel, but we do have a chat function for those of you listening in, that if you do have any questions, please feel free to send it in the chat. And when we get towards the end, we'll make sure that we answer as many of those as we possibly can. All right, Clancy, tell us what you saw.
Sure. So one of the things that we worked on, we saw, obviously, which everyone saw, was that farmers were not able to sell their produce to restaurants because restaurants were shutting down. And I remember one day we had a gentleman come in a wheelchair, missing a leg, veteran, and he's like, Clancy, I can't eat the produce in the farm to family boxes. And I said, okay. He's like, I'm homeless. All I have is a microwave. I said, well, you can have the apples in the box. And he's like, I don't have teeth. And so, and that was a full circle moment that what was desirable for me wasn't necessarily desirable for him. So what we started to do was write grants where we purchase produce from local farms. We give the produce to a restaurant. That restaurant creates this delicious, healthy butternut squash soup, which he could not eat in his hotel. And now we're able to give him this soup so he can heat it up in a microwave and he can actually swallow it. So for us, we're trying to work very hard to invest in our farmers, our restaurants, but also provide nutrient-rich, dense foods to the people who need it most, and cutting barriers at the same time.
Yeah, that's fantastic. There's so many great innovations that have come with this COVID. One of the COVID rainbows, if you will, is some of the innovation that has come with it, and understanding also of people and their needs. Reggie, can you tell us about something?
Absolutely, yeah. You're right. There's so many that you could potentially choose from in this scenario. But for me, I would say that the innovation that I was really blown away by was crowdsource home deliveries. And so obviously one of the challenges throughout COVID-19 was that there was a lot of people who were either exposed to COVID-19 or getting COVID-19, and they were homebound for 2 weeks or whatever the case may be. But then also we have a large group of seniors that could not go around as well and could potentially contract COVID-19. And so we partnered with an organization called Crowdsource Rescue, who during Harvey were utilizing a platform that they created to rescue people who were stuck in their homes due to the flooding. And essentially the way it worked was that a person could say, I need help on the platform, and a volunteer in that area located near them or so forth could say, hey, I'm going to go rescue this person. They would go do it and they would fill the ticket. We utilize that same platform for home deliveries. And so people could go call into our call center, or they can go online and put in a ticket and say, hey, I need food because of X, Y, and Z reason. And a volunteer would go find a pantry that we partnered with to be able to pick up food and then distribute it to that family that's in need so they can have food for the next 2 weeks. And so really innovative model. We had never done a home delivery model up to that point at the time. And so it was something that we were able to start within a month of COVID-19 even starting.
That's fantastic. And I love that people were willing to and signing up to do that. Did you have any trouble getting enough volunteers ever to do that, or too many volunteers?
No, so we had, it was the good thing about it was that since the tickets were coming throughout the region, a volunteer may be able to fill several tickets if they're in the southeast portion of our county, or another side of town. They could do, some of them could service a few more. But the reality is that the tickets started to increase at certain points, right? To where, okay, now that this is picking up, we have 1,000 tickets to fulfill. And so we ended up partnering with other entities, including utilizing our volunteers at the Houston Food Bank, as well as working with other corporations who may have volunteers that were wanting to participate in a way because they couldn't come to our facility. They may have used to been volunteers of the food bank, but they could not come into the facility and make boxes because of social distancing and so forth, or they didn't feel comfortable doing so. So this was another way that we could offer for volunteers to participate and still meet the needs of people within their own community. And they didn't have to go that far. And so a lot of the volunteers were only going within 5 miles of their own home to fulfill tickets and really fulfilling the needs of their neighbors.
That's fantastic. And Rebecca, what have you seen?
You know, it's interesting because one of the most rapid innovations that we saw on the international front sort of parallels one on the domestic, and that's around school feeding. You have, these programs that are set up around the world, and then of course in the United States, where students go to school, receive education, and then also receive nutritious food, sometimes breakfast, lunch, and after school. And all of a sudden you're in an environment where people can't be together. The congregant element is impossible because of the health crisis. And so just how quickly both WFP and its school feeding programs overseas turned on a dime, and this is not somewhere where all of a sudden you've got a bunch of restaurants that have carryout containers that aren't being used because the restaurants are closed. They really had to get creative. And how do you take food that is meant for mass distribution into individualized packets that students and families can take home to be able to still benefit from that nutrition, even though they can't be together in a school community. And similarly here in the US, it was pretty amazing. The rules around school feeding are very structured and very specific around, you're not, because Christy, I'm sure you run into this with some of the grantees at congregate feeding. The whole point is to bring students together, and USDA, to their credit, moved very quickly. There was good support from Capitol Hill too to provide a waiver for the congregate feeding requirements for school meals in the US. And then at the community level, food services at the public schools adapted incredibly quickly to go from, again, the sort of institutional cafeteria model to take home. And I remember early on, they were encouraging everybody to support this system so that it, showed the demand. And we went to the local middle school one time. It was an amazing spread of, apples and carrots and celery and some, I think, frozen burritos. And it was really incredible that just literally not exactly overnight, but practically overnight, these systems in very different contexts were able to adapt. And it was due to just the commitment to get that food to kids and to kids who needed it, even if they weren't able to come to their normal location to get it. So it was just exciting to see, where there's a will, there's a way.
Yeah, definitely. That's so nice to hear. But it makes me think about, kids and receiving food and some of the stigma that may go along with that. And Clancy, I know you talk a lot about stigma in your work. So I want to ask you about, the whole idea of the dignity of choice and the amount of stigma that that can go along with it. How are you seeing that change, and what are you seeing that we need to do perhaps better within some of the work to combat some of the stigma of hunger?
Yeah, such a complex question, right? But it doesn't have to be it doesn't have to be complex. It can actually be really simple. First, I think we need to acknowledge that judgments about hunger keeps those with privilege from really understanding the issue, while at the same time, it discourages people in a hardship for seeking help. And I have two solutions. And the first one is we need to really poke holes in our own personal bubble of influence. And that is going back to my story of when I started at the food pantry, I put myself in an unfamiliar situation. Mm. And when I stepped into that situation, I realized that I was, again, part of the problem. I was wrong. And so being able to be wrong can actually be extremely powerful. And if you find yourself in a place of judgment, it's really a time where you can take a step back and try to look at a positive reason why someone might be doing something. So for example, I'm hearing all the time, I can't believe those people are going to the food pantry in a nice car. And so we have to take a step back and say, let's think about why they might be driving a nice car. Maybe it's their mothers, maybe it's their bosses, maybe they lost their job. They still have their car. They can use it to drive to get to a food pantry because you can't eat a car, but you can use it to go get food. And I think when we can start looking again at a positive reason versus holding resentment, we're going to make the world a better place. And then the second thing is it's really time for us to reflect on when we experienced a time of hardship when you ask for help, whatever that means, did someone meet you with compassion, empathy, or do they meet you with shame and judgment? And if you're someone who was able to ask for food in that time, how did that feel? Maybe you're not that person, but maybe you can remember going to college and eating instant noodles every day in college. I was that person. That's not a rite of passage, it's hunger. And so until we really can self-identify personal stories, and I hear it all the time when I leave the stage, I did not realize my spouse was on food stamps growing up, which is what we call SNAP now. I didn't realize that my stepfather was on food stamps in medical school. So if we're not having these conversations in our home, we're not really going to change the stigma or the shame. So I really feel it's important that we acknowledge our own personal stories, no matter how small or how big, they're all the same. And if we can share them and learn from each other, that's when we're really going to make some change.
Yes, I wrote down, I love this, a positive reason instead of holding resentment for somebody. And I think that's something that I definitely personally should make sure that I hold true. And I think it's a lesson for us all. Thank you for that.
Well, it's healthier for our own peace of mind than walking away stressed and full of resentment. Why not think someone is doing the best that they can?
Yeah, absolutely. I love that outlook. Thank you. And that requires some change, right? It requires a change within yourself. So Adam, let's talk a little bit about change and the changes that we've all seen, and kind of how do we create some of these changes within the systems? How do we try and create change within the system? How do we harness this power of unfortunately that hunger is such a big issue right now. And fortunately, it's a big issue in getting some notoriety at the moment. So how do we harness that change moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very difficult thing to say, there's this one silver bullet to be able to tackle this. I think you need a lot of different stakeholders from a lot of different backgrounds. And it's not just going to be the government saying, hey, we're going to do this one policy and that's going to fix it, because that's not going to be the case. When we think about change at Move for Hunger, we think a lot about process. And I think the best way to change the system is to change the processes that they're putting in place. So in our case, whether it's getting companies to help their customers donate their food when they move, we integrated a very simple process that helps companies drive business, and then in turn is able to benefit the community. But we didn't do that with one moving company or one apartment community. We did that across entire industries. So we have, all of the major leaders in the moving and storage industry, in the relocation management space, in the multifamily housing space. They're all coming together and they're saying, hey, we can make food recovery a core part of our daily operations in a way that benefits our local food banks and pantries. And in doing so, we have got the opportunity to educate this much larger network than maybe Move for Hunger had access to. When you think about all the people that are moving every year, all the people that happen to live in apartments, those people need to become part of the conversation. Those people need to become aware of these issues. So as we continue to grow and launch new programs, whether it be our food drives, whether it be donating your food when you move, or corporate volunteering, et cetera, it's really about creating really simple ways to be able to engage, and also boiling down that problem. We mentioned pre-pandemic, there were 37 million Americans struggling with hunger. The number is now 54 million Americans, which ain't great. But that seems like a number that is almost unfathomable to really tackle, right? But if we look at our own communities, if we look at, hey, you know what, maybe there's only 100,000 people in my county that don't have enough to eat. That's still a big number, but it's a heck of a lot easier to tackle than going after the full 54 million. So I think we need to localize these things and let people, politicians, really all those relevant stakeholders know that this is solvable. But it's going to take collaboration. It's going to take process and systems change. And most importantly, it's going to take the will. We need to want to make change. We need to do things differently than we've been doing for the past several decades, because what has been being done isn't working. We're really providing a safety net in a lot of places, and that safety net is eroding as the challenges become bigger and the funding becomes a little bit harder to come by. So it takes a lot of us working together to tackle this thing.
Absolutely. Collaboration being key. And I like the idea that, if you look at it, and Rebecca, you looked at it globally, but if you look at it just within the US, it's a staggering number. And I feel a little bit helpless in the face of all of that. It kind of reminds me a little bit of a poster I saw when I was a kid. And on one side of the frame, it had a little cartoon of somebody and it had a little thought bubble that said, what can one person do? And on the other side of it, it had an entire crowd of people, everybody with the thought bubble of what can one person do? And I think collaborating together is the way that we actually can do something, and taking on your local need, because as we discussed earlier, there's local need everywhere. And so you too can make a big difference. And a lot of us thinking that what can one person do can actually make a huge difference together. And talking about differences and collaboration and interesting partners. Reggie, I know you work with a bunch of interesting partners at the Houston Food Bank. Can you tell us a little bit about those?
Yeah, and Adam, you did a great job in talking about the what we're dealing with in regards to food insecurity within our country, right? The way that I kind of look at it is that, as an organization, one of the largest food banks in the country, allocating tons of food in the community, we have to really step back and look at what success look like for us as it relates to the issue of food insecurity. And the reality is, success for us is success for our clients, and success for our clients is no longer needing us, right? And so what does it take for an individual or a family to no longer need food resources from a local pantry? And for hunger relief organizations, it may feel daunting because of the fact that what they're needing is better employment. They're needing better access to healthcare. They're needing better access to education. They're needing better opportunities, training opportunities, so that they can increase their earning potential. And all of these things are outside of the scope of what hunger relief organizations traditionally have thought of themselves. We've thought of themselves as providing food resources, providing calories, and more recently providing nutrition as it relates to food allocations. And so when thinking about what success looks like for our clients, we came up with the idea that, we cannot do this work in isolation if we're going to have long-term impacts in the lives of our families. And the reality is, we are not the experts in any of these other fields. We're not the experts in employment. We're not the experts in housing. We're not the experts in healthcare. But we are good at partnerships, right? We developed this big network of partners. And so we need to start developing partnerships across sectors with people who are interacting with clients that are with our clients, right? But in different ways and in different spaces. But there may be mutual benefits for us partnering together to really address some of the key issues and where our partners and our clients intersect. And so we started establishing Food for Change for that particular purpose, working with healthcare institutions, establishing partnerships with workforce development programs, colleges, housing groups, to see where does our work intersect and how can we support each other's work in ways that are impactful for clients for a few reasons. One, so that we can move more upstream in this work, and so that it's not only us trying to put the Band-Aid on the challenge of food insecurity within our communities, but then also to really address the things that those clients are really wanting to do. Their goals are tied to improvements in getting changes in their work status. Their goals may be literally to never see Reggie and his staff ever again, and I want to support them in achieving that goal, right? And so what that looks like is really new ways of partnering for us, and looking at data in a different way, looking at what success looks like for families that we're working with in a different way. And so success may not be that we served this X number of people or provided X number of poundage in the community. Success may be that we were able to connect a client to a program, sustain them for 6 months within that program by providing them with food resources that was sustainable, that gave them the time to participate in the program, that gives them a job to where it increases their earning potential by 30%. And so when we shift our outcomes based upon partnerships and what our clients are wanting to do, as well as our partners are looking to achieve with those clients, we can leverage our resources in different ways that can have bigger impacts, leveraging the monetary value of our food resources, as well as the nutritious value of our food resources to help support people who are maybe managing the chronic conditions like diabetes. And so these partnerships look different in different ways. The metrics and the outcomes look very different, from the healthcare partnerships to the college partnerships, but they're all with the mindset that it's really trying to improve the lives of individuals and leveraging our resources that we have in abundance food to support people achieving other goals that they may have that addresses the root causes of food insecurity.
And I love that. And I have to, full disclosure, our Randall's brand works a lot with the Houston Food Bank, and we love the, I think you guys are one of the more innovative food banks who are defining success, not just by taking the water out of the well, but also working on trying to turn off the tap as well, so that the well is not continuing to fill up. And I love that. And I just want to thank you for that work that you do there, and for the open and innovative thought that you have. Clancy, you work with a lot of companies in working on their strategic work against hunger. What are you seeing there as trends, and how are you trying to move those companies in a direction?
Yeah, so one of the major goals of us is to improve someone's outcomes simply by making access to a healthy supply of food for their clients, their employees, their patients, whoever they're working with. And what has been eye-opening for me, it's been kind of a struggle. If you're working with someone and their outcome is drug and alcohol addiction recovery, and then suddenly we want food access to be one of the priorities, suddenly people are, oh, you know what, that's extra work. I don't know if this is going to work out. There's a little bit of resistance, but within a month or two working with an organization, suddenly they're like, I can't believe we didn't think food was so important, right? Because they were so stuck in their bubble, and there's nothing wrong with that. I've been stuck in my bubble for years. But when they finally see how important food access is, and how when we can increase that, it helps another organization, it helps companies with their bottom lines, it impacts everyone. It doesn't matter where you work, where you live, where you play, hunger is around you. And one of the most important things that I work with people, because I'm always getting asked, can I just come and volunteer at the food pantry? And I say, you know what, I'd rather you find the crack and be the glue in your own organization and be that solution. You need to ask where the barriers are, because if we're not asking the right questions, we are not going to be the solution. We're never an expert in someone's life. So I love seeing that transition with a company or university, it doesn't matter, when they finally say, I can't believe we let this go. Can we go bigger? Can we get bolder? We need to do more. And that's what's exciting about it.
Yeah, I'll say. And I have to say that if we're all in a bubble, your bubble might be more encompassing and larger than most. So I appreciate that with you. Rebecca, you worked a lot with international partners, and imitation being the most sincere form of flattery. Are there any things from an international perspective you've seen that you think, gosh, if we should maybe think about how we do this domestically?
Yeah, I'll answer that in a second, but I first want to provide sort of the international parallel to the numbers Adam threw out on the domestic hunger and the scale that we're talking about. So I'll just talk about it from World Food Programme's work. So in 2019, I'm dating myself, 2019, the World Food Programme served approximately 90 million people in over 80 countries. Wow. Last year, that number went up to 114 million, and this year they're scaling up to serve nearly 140 million. So just that meteoric rise in need in such a short period of time, just for comparison's sake. So it's both. It's that and of the U.S. surge and the international surge. Going to the innovation side of things, these aren't unique to the international space, and actually Reggie touched on some of them in his work, but engaging beneficiaries is part of the process. Co-developing things together is really, really important. I think just broadly across the international development space, this has been a real pivot in the last couple of decades. And I think WFP really led some of this shift as well, instead of saying, here's what I think you need, it's what do you think you need and how can we help you get that? And I think that's a really important thing. On the more sort of wonky side of things, the World Food Programme has an amazing asset it's actually based out of Munich. It's an innovation accelerator. And they gather ideas literally from all over the world. They'll do different events. Pre-COVID, they did something out in Silicon Valley to sort of have an idea fest of, if you're looking at ending global hunger, what types of solution can you bring to the table? And some of these are very practical things, monitoring, post-harvest loss, aflatoxin detectors for grains that I won't get into all the technicalities about aflatoxin, one, because I don't know them, and two, because it's not necessarily relevant, but it can make people really sick. It's a carcinogen and it can spoil crops. And so if you can, one, find ways to mitigate that through innovative storage techniques, hermetic storage in particular, and then also have a way to detect it early so it doesn't spoil an entire, silo. That's a really amazing thing. So how do you get that technology, and then how do you scale it? There are a lot of, if you just Google WFP Innovation Accelerator, you'll see a number of examples. One that came in really handy last year was a Hunger Map Live, and it was a real-time dashboard of the hunger situation across the globe. I know that on the sort of COVID spread side of things, Johns Hopkins had a great real-time map of where COVID was spreading in different countries. Well, this is a similar type of application, but for hunger. And so you can go on the Hunger Map Live and see where are the hot spots. I think one of the things that's most astonishing is just how proportionally Yemen is just astronomically large compared to the rest of the world as far as need to population. So, I think one of the other things too, that's it's not exactly innovative, but it definitely is part of that collaboration and the and on this, whether it's in the US or internationally, certainly doing the work where you can, whether it's in your backyard or through the institution that you're a part of, but then also engaging your policymakers. There isn't, a single policy that's going to end hunger, but policies, particularly at the federal level, but also at the state and local levels, can impact the drivers, positive or negative, and then certainly programs such as in the US with SNAP and the funds that donor countries make to the World Food Program have that ability in a way that is just on a tremendous scale. For instance, the US government historically provides 20 to 40% of the annual contributions to the World Food Program. And that's just, the political will to keep doing that year over year is also driven by the public will to keep doing that year over year. So it's not exactly innovative. That advocacy piece has been around for a long time, but it's absolutely vital to build in addition to the programmatic work that goes on.
Yeah, I mean, advocacy is not only, bailing out the water in the well and turning off the tap. It's making sure there is no tap to the well in some cases. It's a very, very vital piece. Okay, I've got a quick round question for all of you, super quick. Normal wasn't good. We've established that, right? The pandemic made it worse, right? Definitely made it worse. So what bright lights are you seeing coming from the pandemic and moving forward? What are the shining things that we think that happened during the pandemic? Some of those pandemic rainbows that we saw that were just really helped us to fight hunger during the pandemic, but something that we should be definitely bringing forward. And I'm going to go ahead and start with Adam again.
I know we've all been talking about a number of specific things. I think one of the biggest things that's come from the pandemic, which I hope we can continue, is just continuing to spotlight this issue. Clancy mentioned earlier how she's having all these more speaking requests happening. I mean, this is a moment in time, but we need to continue this moment in time. The media needs to be paying attention. Corporations need to be paying attention. Our elected officials need to be paying attention. Regardless of who sits in the White House, we saw a lot of jobs disappear as a result of COVID-19. I think the world's learned to work a little bit differently. And as a result, we're kind of in this period in history where we're in this moment of change. And it's hard to even understand what that is because there haven't been that many world changing moments besides some major world wars, but this is one of them. And food insecurity is going to, need that focus, that attention, that education even more right now, because once everyone starts getting their shots and things start going back to a little bit of normal and people feel like they can volunteer and do things again, my worry is that some of that shine will disappear and we'll just say, hey, hunger is an issue that happens just during the holidays.
Mm.
I'm excited that this conversation is happening today, but I think it's on all of us, including the attendees that are watching this, to continue to keep the pressure out there, to continue to keep that spotlight and the conversations going, because we are several years from getting back to what was normal, if we're being realistic. And my hope is we'll see some of these innovations come into play that can change the game dramatically. So yeah, I mean, I'm definitely optimistic. I've seen more collaboration in the past year than I think I have in the past 12 since I've been running Move for Hunger. And I'm hoping that we can see a lot more of that.
Yeah, that's really hopeful. And this awareness, I think, is something that we need to keep going on. And the awareness, I love that you said not just a holiday problem, because I feel like that is when, and I see Reggie, you're because I know with your work, you probably see a lot of effort during the holidays, and perhaps a lot of turkeys showing up in some of your food banks and some of your pantries that you wish you could get maybe in June. So Reggie, I'll actually go to you next.
Yeah, and I think Adam did a great job in talking about at the macro level what we're really hoping to see, and that is there's some momentum that's been brought upon because of the pandemic, and we want to continue to see that momentum going forward in non-pandemic times so that the issue stays in the spotlight. I think for me, practically, one of the things that I'm really hopeful for is that there's a lot more equity in the way resources are allocated to nonprofits that are really working towards achieving food security for families in need. What I've noticed a lot in particularly in the Houston area is that a lot of the communities of color, the nonprofits in those areas tend to have very little access to sustainable resources to help them meet the needs of families. And so in the cases where they were seeing 2 and 3 times the number of clients that they were seeing pre-COVID-19, they were still seeing real little access to traditional funding streams to be able to support that increased need. And so these organizations who are on the front lines, meeting the needs of the most vulnerable families, are tending to not have the resources necessary to sustain that level of support. And they may be the only people that are providing that type of resource, that type of access to food for those families. And so what I'm hoping is that there's more mindfulness for these types of partners, and there's more support that is brought on for these types of partners going forward, because they are doing really great work that may not fit in traditional philanthropic standards, but are really being meaningful and meeting really dire needs for families who didn't really have anywhere else to go.
Yeah, I'm very encouraged to hear the words food justice come up more and more in conversations, and sometimes in conversations where I didn't think we would necessarily have that phrase used. And so that's really great. Clancy, what do you have?
Sure. So something that always gets me is the volunteers. They're the heroes. They're the unsung heroes. I mean, our volunteers show up in the rain, the freezing weather in Pennsylvania, the heat of the summer. Every day they would show up, and I would just sit back and just watch them work together and just come together. Because I remember back in March 13th, 2020, we made a decision to stay open, and I knew I was going to lose 99% of my volunteers. And our local universities came together. We actually have, we're set up as a federal work study program through university. That was a new partnership that came out. We have another partnership with Career Links. So people looking for a job, they can come and get hours and get paid and experience with us. So a lot of different community collaborations really formed. But I have to say, the inspiration, our volunteers say it all the time, that they get just as much as the people receiving, if not more. And there's something special about that. And just to echo what Adam said, I really want us to remember that hunger does not have a vaccine. And so when all of this goes away, hunger is going to be here for years to come. And I think we need to remember that, and we need to stay strong with that, especially when we start seeing judgment and shame and stigma coming out more, because it will. So, but thank you.
Yeah. And Rebecca.
think the big thing for me is the continued of addressing U.S. and global hunger. I think too often we get caught in this false dichotomy of it's one or the other, and it's really not. We are able to address both through policy solutions, through our volunteer time, through charitable work, and through just talking to our friends and talking to our networks and helping folks to understand the issues better and help them understand that there are ways to work through these. I just tell a quick story that Adam, you may have heard before, but when I started working at the Alliance about 8 years ago, I was telling my daughter, who was 8 at the time, about this job change, and I was going to be traveling more. She's like, "So, Mom, you're working to try and end hunger, right?" It's like, yeah, that's what I'm doing. She said, "Well, if you do your job, then you're not going to have a job anymore." And, I think it's really easy, to get a little jaded or even a little cynical and think that this isn't possible, but it absolutely is. And that moment with my daughter is what that's the touchstone I come back to. It's like, okay, we all need to be that 8-year-old saying, well, this is silly. Why don't people have enough to eat? And what are we each doing about it?
Yeah, my wish is that all of us are out of a job sometime. Thank you very much. I'm going to actually take a look at some of these questions that have come in. I don't know, panelists, if you're looking at them, and I don't know if the audience can see them, but my heart is full given how many questions there are about how can I get involved? What is one thing I can do? How do I get involved? What can I do? How can I continue this? And I'm so grateful to all of you asking those questions. And so I think maybe there are so many great questions here, and we can try and answer your questions. I do want to say the one question about Mississippi, I just wanted to read, and then maybe we'll do a final round with kind of, and I'm going to give you a minute to prepare for this. I think Sean here had one of the best. It says, if you could have one wish granted to help your organization to fight against hunger, what would that be? What can I do to help? So that's the final lightning round. But in the meantime, I will read this question from an anonymous attendee, and it says, one downfall in Mississippi is that we saw several areas that had too much food. Some organizations that wanted to help but have never worked in this space would send tens of thousands of pounds of food to an area that may only have the capacity to distribute food, nor the citizens to use that much. The food would have to be moved again, which costs funds that should have been used for more food. So I think that's a really good point. And as we are talking about this lightning round, how can I help? I think that all help is fantastic, and everybody's heart is absolutely in the right place in asking this question. But I think from this esteemed panel, I think it would be great to hear from you what you see as the thing that you feel that if I'm just a volunteer, or if I am there's some people who are part of a company that says, hey, how can my company help? What would you say? And I'm just going to go Brady Bunch around again. So we'll start with Adam.
For people that really want to engage, I mean, at least at the Move for Hunger level, you can go to the website. You can get involved that way, whether it be holding a food drive, a fundraiser, making a donation. You can donate your food literally when you're moving. If you're working with one of our movers or live in one of our 1,000+ multifamily community partners. And I'd say for those companies, large corporations, and even down to like the local school level, there are ways that you get involved, that you should get involved. I mean, we talked about advocacy. We talked about writing letters to your local elected officials. We talked about team building activations, as Clancy kind of mentioned too, and the joy that people actually get out of doing these things. So at least for Move for Hunger, visit moveforhunger.org. There's a lot of ways that you can take action. And it doesn't matter what that action is, just do something.
Just do something. I like it. Clancy.
Sure. So the one thing I work with my students all the time is I ask them what they're passionate about. What are they good at? And how can they apply that to fighting hunger? If you're a writer, if you're a singer, if we actually have a balloon artist, she comes to our food pantry. She lost her job. And when she first came, I'm like, oh, balloons, people can't eat balloons. Balloons aren't going to fight hunger, right? And she started doing her balloon art, and people are driving through. We're a drive-through operation. And it hit me 2 weeks in. I went up to her and I said, I get it. Your balloon art is creating a positive atmosphere, a positive experience for the little kids going through. And we know that childhood trauma could play a role. A negative experience could last a lifetime. And you're making those parents feel proud because that child is excited and wants to come back. And her balloon art is probably one of the most passionate, fun things that I've ever experienced at the food pantry. So really, like I said before, you don't have to volunteer at a food pantry. We love for volunteers to come, but I also encourage you, if you're in a school, what can you do in that school? If you're in your own faith-based organization, if even a soccer team, what is going on in that environment? Because hunger is in every zip code. It's everywhere you are, independent of where you live. And so my charge to you is really, again, find that crack and be the glue and apply your passion.
I love that, applying your passion. You know, I'm volunteering actually this weekend, and unless people want worms, I don't think balloon animals are my thing. But I'm actually gonna really think about that and see what I can bring. My daughter and I are doing it together. Let's see what we can bring that can bring our passion to it.
Yeah, I had someone play the piano classically years ago, a nutrition student. I said, watch how it is today without you playing the piano. And then watch how people are when they walk in. Their heads are lifted up more. It's more calming. It's inviting. And just her playing the piano changed the entire atmosphere of the food pantry.
I love that. That is fantastic. Reggie, what do you recommend?
I mean, I think those suggestions were great, and like Adam said, I mean, just do something, right? I think for me, one of the things that I've tried to become, you know, because even for people who are in this space, we also have to challenge ourselves to learn more about the space as well, and figure out new strategies, get different perspectives, and so forth. So the one thing is, it's an ongoing journey to really get a grasp of this issue, because it's so complicated and it changes over time and how it looks. So for me, it's just always being aware of what is around me and how it relates to this work. And so, like Clancy said, I mean, when you're at the school, there's going to be people at a school who are going to be impacted by food insecurity. Question how they interact at the school and address that need there. At your doctor's office, I mean, are they screening for food insecurity at your doctor's office? At the college, are they identifying ways in which to engage with food insecurity? Your company. So I would say it's so much closer than we think. The places where food insecurity interacts with our spaces in our environment, to where you don't have to go that far to find places to make a difference. I would even challenge some people to even call 211 and go through a client journey and say, hey, I'm food insecure. Could you provide me some spaces in which to get food resources, and follow that journey just to see how challenging it could potentially be for people to get food resources. Because I think when you become more aware, you find the spaces where you and your influence can be really beneficial.
That's great. Love that. Rebecca?
And I'm just going to go too, since Sean said for our organization, I will make the pitch. Go to wfpusa.org, learn about the work of the World Food Program. I mean, the UN World Food Program, it's incredible, both the scale at which they reach folks and the way in which they reach folks. Read some of the stories of the women and children and men around the world who benefit from the work of the World Food Program, and then share that story with your network. It's amazing how little the general public knows about the hunger needs, whether it's in the US or around the world. Everyone can name the Kardashians, but they can't tell you about hunger in their community or hunger around the world. And find that, be that glue, find that one thing that you can do, whether it's sharing the story, doing a fundraiser, doing a food drive in your community. Just share a story, and this is obviously on a scale beyond what most of us are capable of, but the musician The Weeknd, he's Ethiopian, and he was really concerned about what's going on in northern Ethiopia right now. And I mean, it's a really dire situation with a lot of people in crisis. And so he just a week ago on Easter Sunday made a personal gift to the World Food Program that's going to provide 2 million meals. But just as importantly, he used form as a celebrity and an entertainer to spread the word. And I mean, the uptick on that media, it was unbelievable. And so obviously he's got a huge megaphone and a huge platform, But all of us have our own networks, whether it's 2 people, 200 people, or 200,000 people, and just talk about it. Let folks know, both here and abroad, what the need is, and also exactly what we've talked about today, what they can do about it.
Yeah, see what assets you have yourself, and then bring those. Something similar to what Clancy said about, bring your passion to it. So I want to wrap up here. I want to really thank all the panelists. I'm going to take away that I'm going to do something, and I'm going to use our passion, keep learning, keep going on that journey, and then share that journey with others. Thank you, panelists, for your spirit of generosity, and thank you for your time, and thank you for Move for Hunger for making this all possible. Really appreciate everybody being here.